Good morning once again. It is time for the Morning Mindset edition of the Live, Build, Change podcast. Are you ready for the day? This is God's day, and you are His instrument. You are His tool. You are His servant, His child, to express His life in the world. That's who you are. And sometimes He calls us to do that in the simplest of ways, through a smile to someone, through a kind word, through a hug, through a plate of fresh-baked cookies. I mean, there's all kinds of ways we're able to bring joy and blessing into people's lives so that they can see the reality of the God that we serve. But there are other times when God calls us to do things that are much more difficult than that, things that push us to our limits and beyond. You know, you see this phrase sometimes, people writing Christian cards and things like that, and they'll say, God will never call you to something that you can't handle. And I believe that's not true. I believe God will actually do the exact opposite. I believe God will almost always push you into things that you cannot handle so that you will learn to depend on Him, because it's in His strength that real change begins to happen. It's in His strength that people are able to see the possibilities and the miracles that are available for their own life. It's not in what we can do as human beings who have come to faith in Him. It's in what He can do through us. It's that contrast that people see between us, the fallen, still failing human, and the results that come from our lives that are lived in faith in our overpowering, overwhelming, awesome God. Do you see how that works? And we've been talking about the biblical character Moses, and he's an everyday person, just like you and I. He had his fears. We've read about them in chapters 3 and 4 of the book of Exodus. But today, as we approach the end of chapter 4, we see that Moses is actually relenting from his complaints and his resistance and is going back to Egypt, finally convinced by God that God will provide for him everything he needs to do this overwhelming job of leading millions of people out of captivity, out of slavery, and into a new land that God has promised for them. That's a huge step. It's a huge step for any of us when we face this overwhelming task that we know we have to accomplish, but we don't know how to do it. What do you do then? What do you do when you're overwhelmed by the size and the magnitude of what God is calling you to do? You just do the next right thing. Don't look too far down the road. Don't look at the scope of the problem before you and the challenges ahead. Look at the next right thing and do that. In Moses' case, it was to go and talk to his father-in-law, Jethro, who he worked for as a shepherd. And he went to Jethro and he said to him, please let me go back to my brothers in Egypt to see if they're still alive. And Jethro said, go in peace. Do you see? Moses just took the next logical, simple, right step. And then the next verse, verse 20 of chapter 4, Moses took his wife and his sons and had them ride on a donkey and went back to the land of Egypt. And he took the staff of God in his hand. So you see, he packed his bags. He arranged to get transportation. I mean, he did the next right step to head in the direction God had for him to go. And that's all you and I need to do. When we feel overwhelmed by the size or the magnitude of what God has called us to do, we just take a deep breath and remind ourselves who our God is, and we take the next right step. So today, whatever you are facing, remember, your God, the God of all creation, is with you, and He only expects you to take the next right step.